The Wendigo is a terrifying creature that holds a big place as one of the most frightening creatures in Aboriginal lore. And this is for a good reason. Most often described as a massive, hairy brute up to 15 feet tall. A mix of human and animalistic features, the Wendigo has long been said to partake in the acts of murder, insatiable greed, and cannibalism. The creature is supposedly a gaunt, extremely tall apparition that had glowing eyes, yellowed fangs, wicked claws, and a long tongue, and is often also depicted with antlers, and was eternally enthralled into an insatiable hunger, growing ever larger with each kill it made, yet never feeling satiated, always skeletal and slight no matter how much it ate. One description of the Wendigo was given by a native author and ethnographer, Basil H. Johnson. He describes it as, "The Wendigo, it was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones, with its bones pushing over its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into the sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it did have were tattered and bloody, unclean and suffering from the suppurations of the flesh. The Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, death and corruption." There are also some variables in what their powers are supposed to be. Sometimes they are described as having the ability to turn invisible, to read minds, or to mimic human voices in order to draw victims away to isolated areas, as well as shape-shifting powers and the ability to generate waves of profound fear. The origins also have some variations, but the main cause, according to the majority of traditions, is as humans who were overcome by greed or hunger, or those who resorted to cannibalism to stay alive. In one account, the Wendigo started as a warrior who made a deal with the devil in order to save his tribe from some unspecified calamity. In others, it is simply greed and cannibalism that does the trick. Or one can be made into a Wendigo by another one of the creatures, yet every one of them have the same outcome, the spawn of an unholy creature and an abomination that seeks constant sustenance. Experiences with a Wendigo are more something you hear about in the stories of the past. However, even in modern day, there are still sightings of what some may call a Wendigo. In this video, I will talk about probably 3 stories in particular that I found to be particularly scary about the sightings of a Wendigo. I hope you enjoy. This first case is from an Aboriginal man who was camping near an unspecified reservation when he was 13 years old. Things started off normally, and they all got rather strange when several odd occurrences began to unfold. They would find dead birds around the campground, things went missing from their own camp, and they were at a loss to explain what was going on. It escalated when they began to hear footsteps in the area. A terrible stench would sometimes waft through. There was a constant, inescapable feeling of being watched. They nevertheless stayed at the camp, as it was a trip they had been planning for months. And on the second to last day, something very bizarre would unfold. One of which, the witness says, "Although these occurrences were a disturbance, it did not deter us from staying for the final 2 days, as we've been planning this trip for months. But one experience years ago on the day right before our departure still haunts me to this day. I had been strolling out through the forest while looking for firewood when I heard rustling in the bushes behind me. As this happened, it seemed that all the life around me ceased, because I could only hear my own heartbeat and the lone heavy footsteps approaching me. When I heard my name being called for what seemed in every direction, it echoed from in front of me while also coming from behind. The voice calling me was a harsh, raspy, animalistic in tone, and seemed to be an imitation of my sister's voice, who had just recently left the trip due to stress, only a few hours prior. This sent horrendous chills down my spine, so I ran the fastest I've ever had back towards the campsite. While running, I could hear the twigs and leaves crunching behind me. I finally reached the campsite when the footsteps suddenly stopped. I was relieved and slumped over to the cabin stairs, where I slipped on a rock, slipping out into the makeshift fire. It had caused me to head straight into it. The blazing force of nature had almost burned my face when I was just stopped mid-fall. I hadn't gained my balance back, but it was as if somebody was hanging on to me and pulled me back. I'm not sure what it was, but my family suggested that it was my guardian angel saving me from an early death. But after that experience, I have never been to the same campsite ever again, and I didn't go camping for a few years after that. Still, what really scares me the most was from back then was when we were leaving the site. I looked back through the car window and saw a figure standing at the tree line staring at me. It was lanky and looked starved to the point of having his skin wrapped tightly around its bones. But then I looked onto the pathway, the footprints were completely gone, and as I blinked, we ran to the corner and had vanished into thin air. This has left me questioning what is in those woods, and was it a reality what I saw? But when my sister asked why I was so shaken, I told her what I had experienced, and her face went white. She had told me that before leaving, a terrifically gaunt figure had been watching us across the riverbank, and that it had noticed her and ran away on all fours at a fictional speed. She shakily said, staying quite frightened until after. Then she spoke a phrase that still haunts me today. Before I left early, the thing had left long, deep scratch marks on the trail sign. It was the same trail that I was chased on. So what do you think this was? Was it a Wendigo, or was it something else? You decide. The next report started similarly. The man found mutilated animals around the remote property, and they were in a rather grisly fashion, including dead foxes and deer had their spinal columns torn out and strewn around. Vicious claw and teeth marks and limbs were rendered from their bodies. Some of these animals were disemboweled and their entrails found hanging from bushes, or sometimes even trees, like a macabre Christmas tree ornament. Sometimes they were simply torn in half, with one of the halves missing. It was all very unsettling indeed, but it was about to graduate into the horrifying. The witness explains further. So let me lay out the land for you. My house is about 100 yards from a small stream that splits the small wooded area in half. And on the far side of the stream, my house, there are large trees. So I was out one day, and all of a sudden, I felt cold and uncomfortable, like I was being watched. I also became increasingly paranoid that somebody or something was out there with me, so I decided to head in. Plus, the sun was setting, and dusk would be upon me soon, so I started walking towards my house, which would mean I would have to walk uphill. So I started walking. At first, I was walking out of the woods, like I was in someone's yard and they had just told me to get off. Not a fast pace, but moving with a purpose, you know. Then I kind of felt someone was really looking at me. So I turned around and saw a large creature about 80 yards from me standing across the stream. It then proceeded to take a step toward me. And I'm not really too athletic, but I'm not mega weak. I would say that if I had to run about 20 yards uphill through the woods, it might take me half a minute or so. I ran out of those woods in about 10 seconds. It's the most I've ever been scared, and the most adrenaline that I've ever felt run through me. Now I know what you're wondering. Could I have been dehydrated or having hallucinations? Well, I've never hallucinated in my life, and I wasn't dehydrated because about 10 minutes prior to this, I drank an entire bottle of water, and I always make sure that I'm hydrated before I go woodland exploring. There was no way it was just a tree, because every time I go out there, I go to where I spotted it, and there isn't a single tree small enough to remotely look like what I saw. Since then I haven't spotted it, but I hear it. It's believed by Aboriginals that Wendigo will call out for help like a human in order to lure people toward it. I have heard what sounds like a little girl calling for help out in those woods. It's still terrifying to even think about. This last story is from the least place you'd expect it, from Yorktown, Texas, in the USA. This story starts: Wendigos are real, and the one that has been sighted all over Texas is the same one I saw a couple times. This last time, though, I saw a clear, detailed body, and I'll never forget its huge, black eyes. I've heard its mimicry of dying animals, and even my old friend calling for help from the dark forest, even though I knew they were home because I just dropped them off at their house, and I walked home myself. It's tried many times to lure me into the woods, but I know its games. In the winter of 2016, twice in 2018, around the fall months, and again in the new year of 2019. On January 12th, 2019, it was a relatively cold night with a slight misting. I circled my whole town because it's pretty small. Coming home, I walked by this large patch of woods that nobody goes in, except for me because I'm a more adventurous type. As I'm coming up to it, with the woods on my right hand, an old metal building with two small white houses beside it on my left, I see this 8 to 10 foot pale figure briskly walk across the dirt road from one of the houses to the woods, about 40 feet from me. I know I saw something, but I ignore it and continue forward. This is just another side note from me. If I'm walking and it's like coming on dusk or any point in the day, and I see a 8 to 10 foot tall pale figure walk across the road in front of me, there's no way in hell that I'm going forward toward it. It's just not happening. I'll find some other way to get home. I'll walk back and call a friend. I don't care. I'm just not doing that. He says this feeling of heaviness and dread washed over him as if he was being watched. I take out my phone and switch on the light, and I keep it aimed at the woods. I turn my head back and forth from the houses to the woods as I'm walking still. About the fifth time I look at the woods, there it is. It's on all fours, crouching over, but it's easily still 5 feet tall at the shoulder. I'm around 5 feet, by the way, so that's how I could tell. Again, it was only about 40 feet away, but it had bleached white skin, a bald head, huge black eyes, a human face and body, except it looked extremely emaciated, and its arms were like super long twigs. It started and swayed its body back and forth like a mantis. This is when I ran as fast as I could. I only looked back after I ran a block and it didn't chase me, but I'm pretty sure it was upset that I interrupted its spying session on the people sleeping in those houses. Be careful in Yorktown, Texas at night. If you're here, I know you'll believe me and you'll take my advice. So I'll ask you, what do you think happened? Are Wendigos real? Or are they just something that's in our distant past? Were they a misnomer for something else? On the following stories that I read, I've seen some comments claiming that it was a Skinwalker and not a Wendigo. However, I would like to note that a Skinwalker typically is also a Native American story and a Canadian Aboriginal story about a shaman or a witch who can take the form of animals. The Skinwalkers that are in paranormal stories today don't really fit the caricature of a Skinwalker. I think they're called Skinwalkers because they can take the form of other people, or sometimes do the Wendigo thing where they can call it for help, but the voice is all screwed up. So in a lot of these Skinwalker stories, I wonder if what they are encountering is a Wendigo instead. Because it really depends on the region what they can do, apparently. And the other name for the Skinwalker that you might find on X, like on the 4chan board X, is a Fleshgait, which is the other name they gave for it. Because a Skinwalker is typically very different than what they describe in a lot of their stories, whether they're real or not. I make no claims to that. But what do you think happened in all these stories? If you liked this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I will be posting more videos like this in the future. And I hope that then, whenever I do post them, that you'll pull up a stump and join me. Have a good night.